If I'm a CFO and I'm reviewing business cases or deliverables, I think we are now at the place where we can expect that AI is pervasive in basically anyone's analysis. Too accessible, too easy, and too good at what it does to not assume that people are using AI to arrive at their assumptions. And if I'm a CFO, I'm now asking people in these different business cases, what's your intuition versus what's the AI saying? And I want to see and understand where you, as my trusted recommender colleague in this organization, are using your brain power to interpret what an AI's synthesis would be and layering in your unique and softer, nuanced synthesis on top. So I think that's going to be increasingly included and expected as AI slop reaches its apex. The value of human intuition incorporated within a recommendation is going to grow in importance, and it's going to be isolated separately from the AI synthesis in those analyses.
Welcome, gentlemen. We have Russell Lester. I'm going to put the spotlight on you for a little bit. Our CFO, I'm sure at some point in your career, you've been called the CF No, true or false? Guilty as charged?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Not sure if you embrace that or not. I guess my question for you is, do you feel like in the past, I'm not talking about your current role because we're going to dive into your current role, but do you feel like in the past you've had to adopt that mentality or that title to some degree just out of sheer volume of request or because of the stupidity of some request? Or I've never been a CFO, so I can only assume.
It is interesting, and I think it differs based on how you ascend to the role of CFO. I came up through the ranks of analytics and FP&A. So we were naturally building partnerships and seats at the table with our functional counterparts. And so it was an interesting transition because I would go from being the analyst or leader that was advocating for that group to help them make the case for an investment to the CFO, to then I was the one that was having to make the judgment call. And that transition, you have to be willing to push back more without feeling like you're breaking those bonds or breaking that partnership. You need to create that sense of respect that you're not just going to rubber stamp every single thing that comes across your desk. But it's not an instantaneous and instinctual evolution. Maybe for some CFOs, they naturally are crotchety curmudgeons that say no to everything. But I mean, I
thought that was part of the job description, but maybe not.
No, it's funny, growing up in leadership, I always found the people that thought that being the powerful naysayer and contrarian on the call was the power move. That never impressed me because I thought it was the laziest and easiest move in the room because all you have to do is just disagree with what everybody's saying. And I saw a lot of CFOs do that, and it was rarely well informed. They were just like, oh, I am a robot and my role is to say no and be grumpy about everything. So I've tried to finesse it, probably imperfectly, and I have indexed on one side or the other at any given time. Probably sometimes I'm too nice as a CFO. Other times, maybe out of nowhere, people feel like I'm being grumpy because I'm coming in hot off of some investor or board call. So I think it really varies.
And that's where I want to dig into today, because ideally, as a CFO, you know when to push back and when you don't need to push back. So you don't need to either adopt the either or, hey, I'm having a good day and feeling charitable or whatever the case may be. So I'm going to approve, and I'm having a bad day, I'm just going to push back. But I don't know exact stats, but I've heard numbers that for every dollar of, budget that's approved, you have multiples of that requested. So to some degree where, you have to push back. Where I want to tie this episode today is Justin and I were at a dinner last night with a bunch of heads of procurement. And one thing that we're talking about, and it's landing really well in the market right now, is part of the reason Tropic is really helping us be so successful as procurement leaders is because it helps us know where to focus. We cannot anymore cover literally everything. Everything should flow through the process, but we can't spend our time, on every deal. And so some people default to, okay, if it's over a certain dollar amount, that's where I'm going to spend my time. And I can speak from experience knowing that sometimes I can spend a lot of time on a big dollar amount and not move the needle at all or very little. And sometimes I can spend a little bit of time or some amount of time on a smaller dollar amount and move the needle quite a bit, both from like a savings perspective, from a sourcing perspective, et cetera. So knowing where to focus has been extremely valuable for a procurement person like me. And if we take a look at the opposite side of that same coin from a CFO perspective, I'm guessing that because you work for Tropic, that a lot of times a request comes through, it gives you data to where you know when to push back and when to not to. So, Justin, I want to go to you just for a second because you had a post. I can't remember when it was, a couple of weeks ago, a week ago, a month ago. It all blends together. But you had a big dollar amount come through, and I'm not going to say you rubber stamped it, but you approved it pretty quickly. Maybe share that example with us.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we drink our own champagne, and as part of that, when a renewal is coming up and I get a reminder alert, as part of that renewal, I get kind of a digest that is kind of a snapshot of Tropic's data relative to a purchase that's coming through. So we had a $50,000 renewal that was coming up, and the data said that pricing was really good. The terms that we had were really strong, and while it's relatively expensive for us, $50,000, there's very little to actually do with this. And the recommendation is just auto renew, which was a kind of a breath of fresh air, because usually when I get those reminders, it's really like time to gear up for battle, and prepare for the time and energy to actually work through that renewal. But in this case, it was a relief because that was time that I could spend elsewhere. And the data was telling me that it wasn't going to be a fruitful effort to spend the next several weeks banging my head against the wall.
I mean, Russell, I don't know how that resonates with you, but I feel like that's almost become a requirement in this day and age where, clearly suppliers can pop up, AI tools can pop up left and right. You've got legacy tools, you've got new tools coming in, knowing where to push back, to make sure you're getting a better deal, stronger ROI, but also knowing, hey, this has strong ROI. This is a good deal. Letting it flow through and impact your business positively as soon as possible can become a competitive advantage, I would say, to some degree. Russell, how does that resonate with you?
It resonates. And I think what comes to mind is I'm not just a hammer and everything is a nail. Thus, I have to treat everything the exact same way. I also think about, ironically, as you were talking, my marriage, and you're probably thinking, what? I've been married 26 years.
I am thinking, what?
Yep. I've been married 26 years, and I've learned that not every interaction and conversation needs the same response. I don't always need to be in fix it mode. Oftentimes, and we have a great relationship, she will say, and I'm just sharing this with you because I need to, explain where I'm coming from, how I'm feeling. And actually, I don't need to do anything. I just need to be a good listener and hear the process that she went through in going through something. And oftentimes this happens in business. I've messed up at times when I have read a signal to say, I need to lean in and put my foot down and really rattle the cages and make sure my team is doing what they need to do and go beat up a supplier. And if I come in hot without context like that every single time, it oftentimes is not pointed in the right direction. So to your point, knowing when you need to lean in and light the fires and escalate is just as powerful as knowing where, no, everything is fine. We're green across the board. The benchmark came back good. We're negotiating according to the playbook. The supplier is playing ball. The team feels good about our compliance standards. We are good to go, Russell. All we need is your approval. Or, Russell, we're very stuck. Here's all the areas of friction. We need you to lean in. And so it's hard to do that quickly and efficiently if every single time you go through that cycle, you start at square one thinking, am I just here to listen and nod? Or am I here to actually engage and be the hammer with the nail, right?
One dynamic that I think is happening a lot more, as you said that, Russell, is I feel like in years previous, it was incumbent on a supplier's, account manager, sales rep to build the ROI case, and that to serve as the primary data point that would go through to the CFO to cover, a business case, right? And the buyer is using the supplier's ROI case to then justify a purchase. And now what I'm seeing a lot more is that because this type of data is available around benchmarking and insights around how this falls relative to a comparison set, the expectation of buyers is now to build business cases not just with supplier driven ROI cases, but also buyer driven data points to say, is this a good deal for us or not a good deal? And that addition is giving CFOs a lot more conviction and confidence that we are spending our money effectively, and confidence that the business team is being good stewards of the business in fighting for the right price points and justifying an expense to suggest hey, we are getting a good deal here relative to what we could be for this set of products.
Justin, I want to dig into what you just talked about, specifically, the data and what you're seeing. If because I'm guessing not everyone is leveraging the same data. Maybe tee that up a little bit about, I don't know if we call it a maturity model or something like that, but what are those different, levels of data maturity, and what are you seeing right now? What are you seeing in terms of like how people are operating?
Yeah, I mean, we have the benefit of getting to work with CFOs at very different size companies, from small SMBs, AI startups that are moving at the pace of, the speed of light, to kind of like the mid-sized, PE-backed companies or, growth equity-backed companies that are focused on efficient growth, all the way up to enterprises that are, public companies that have, public markets to answer to when it comes to their costs, whether they're growing or shrinking. So the needs around data and the expectations are quite different among that spectrum. When I think about our small companies, as that group may only have a small handful of suppliers that really move the needle. And from a time standpoint, there just really isn't the same time in the day to run a holistic sourcing event. It's really about, what do I need right now, and how can I have some amounts of confidence that I'm getting a decent deal, right? So for them, it's all about the time element and maybe a single data point, one kind of benchmark to say, okay, we're not getting screwed. Let's pass this thing through and go back to focusing on growth and the initiatives that are going to propel our business forward. If you compare that to the enterprise, where you have dedicated technology sourcing teams and procurement functions whose entire remit is focused on making sure we're getting the best prices, that we're working with the best partners for these different use cases, they're going to have a much deeper intent around the type of data and the amount of data that they need to feel confident around those purchases. But even still, in that group, even at the enterprise, they think about their spend, as part of the massive strategic spend, that no matter, even if you have a data point that says you're getting a good deal, we know that at the end of the day, if it's above a certain threshold, you're going to spend time on it, because the dollars mean enough to have an impact and to spend the time and effort to do so. But where the real value comes is kind of that everything else, the mid to long tail, where you don't have time, and data can help you really point in the right direction, to Shields, what you shared in the beginning, where the juice is really worth the squeeze, and starting to uncover savings opportunities that may not have surfaced otherwise because it was below a certain threshold that didn't meet the criteria of like focus and attention for these bigger technology sourcing teams.
Yeah, it makes me, and I don't know if there's a contrast, point of view for you, Russell, but I would love to hear, based on everything Justin just said, when a request comes across your plate, what are you looking for, and how has that evolved over the past, I don't know, couple months, couple years, whatever, what did you used to do and what are you doing today? And maybe there's no change. I don't know. Maybe it's the same data. It's just easier to get.
No. Oh, I have so many things I could say about this particular topic. First of all, what does a CFO look for? We're looking for alignment to the company plan and how this particular investment will advance that, whether it's revenue growth, efficiency, risk mitigation, customer sat. So you think about, what are we solving for as a business this year? The critical few priorities. Sometimes you'll see them show up on a plan on a page, right? And so does this investment support that? And what's the connection? What's the through line that helps me know that this is worth spending money on? Because not everything is worth equal focus and equal effort. So that's one thing. But we also want to know what alternatives were considered. What are the measures of success? How will we know if when we implement this, it will work? Are we getting a good price? Obviously, is on every CFO's mind. And how do we know that? And where do we stand right now? What are the additional levers we can pull? Are we getting the best payment terms we could get? Do we want this to be multi-year or not? And if so, why? All of these new AI tools standing up. I've spoken in the past about fears around Frankenstack, where we have this sprawl happening and you're going to get all these tools. And so should we sign single year until we see how all of these work together and avoid putting ourselves on the hook for multiple years? But even pausing and stepping back from all that, just data in general, the data is now more accessible, but there could be more false positives and bad signals. Here's my fear. We were talking to a friend that does legal work and saying, man, this AI stuff, is this really hurting your business? And he was saying it's interesting because now everybody now has a legal advisor or a financial advisor or an analytics advisor. They can run things through AI and they come back knowledgeable and with a ton more questions. Well, this happens to CFOs as well, because people can go out and pull up who knows what data from who knows what source, who knows what freshness or recency, and they could give false signals that this meets our standards, we're getting a good price, this is the best alternative. But if you ask AI questions in a certain way, it will give you back exactly what you asked. Like, I'm trying to get approval from the CFO on making this purchase. Provide me back evidence that I'm getting a good price, I've negotiated well, blah, 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 right? And AI will be like, okay, I'll give you that. But you asked the question incorrectly. And so this is the problem, is that for all the data we have flowing, we have to know if we're reading, as CFOs, are we reading the right data? Where did this come from? What is the source of truth? Is this reliable? Is this a false signal that I'm getting?
How do you protect against that? Because I can see, if I put myself in your shoes, as some sort of justification come across that's very convincing, but likely generated by ChatGPT versus others. And to be fair, I've heard of other procurement leaders using ChatGPT or Claude or some other AI device as a benchmarking service. And that scares me, because where's that data coming from? How do you protect against that?
I think we have to ask more questions, and the questions that we ask may have to change. So if they're getting the benchmark information and negotiation strategies, for example, from Tropic, well, we know that that's first party data from live discussions, live negotiations. That's not some random generic AI slop casting a wide net out into ChatGPT and praying something comes back legitimate that's third, fourth, fifth hand, 5 years old, not even relevant. So it's know your source. Know your source. So because it might not just be like, we're talking kind of about software purchases perhaps, but it could be anything, right? It could be a marketing campaign, or it could be, whatever it is. What is the source of their information, and how did they validate the accuracy of it? CFOs have always needed to do that, though. And when the salespeople would come forward with funnel conversion estimates, we need to know what's your source. So that hasn't shifted for CFOs, but we need to not rest on our laurels and be lazy just because now we have all this agentic data flowing.
I think authority and credibility play a much more important role in this age of AI, Russell, exactly to that point, because anyone can put together a really strongly worded and convincing argument with the power of ChatGPT. And I think it's tricky, because I could see from your shoes as the CFO, you want to trust your people to come up with convincing business cases and well-reasoned arguments. But knowing the tools that everyone has at their disposal now, there's a question that it inevitably comes to light, which is, tell me your source. Where did this come from? How did you come up with this? And like asking those questions casts a little bit of doubt on the credibility of whatever analysis or work has come together, which is not fun and not empowering as a stakeholder. But it's probably increasingly necessary to isolate whatever noise might be coming through the abundance of data and information that can be accessible from the real signal and reliable sources that matter for each of these situations.
Yeah, definitely. I don't want good business leaders to short circuit intuition, experience, and context in the process. Because in the past, if it was more manual, their own internal filter around those things that I just mentioned would be higher. But now that it's easier and more accessible to spin this stuff up and crank it out in a beautiful presentation that's utterly convincing with charts and quotes. And then when you ask, did you make any of this up? And it's like, well, yeah, I did, because I was trying to build a good business case for you. So I think it is all about the questions we ask and really having our antenna up, not in a suspicious way, like people are trying to bamboozle us, but more in a way that understands this is now where we're at, where we need to authenticate our source, to your point. There used to be the Good Housekeeping seal of approval, or what's the periodical that you would research to know if you're buying the best appliance? What's the trade publication? Consumer Reports.
Okay, I was going to go with Angie's List, but yeah, same thing.
Yeah, mine's a more dated Consumer Report. But like, that's what we're talking about, is how do we know, single source of truth, trusted, reliable, if only everything we got had some seal on it that was like, this is trustworthy. And we don't have that. So we don't know, or like a confidence, if every data point we got had a confidence rating of like made up versus like completely reliable, it won't. So we just have to be in tune with, I notice a lot of M dashes. That may imply that.
Last thing I'll say on this is I think, even 3 months ago, I would probably give extra kudos to some AI generated analysis on a specific sticky problem, right? And that was, oh, great, we're using the power of AI to diagnose and look at this problem. And I can feel myself pulling back from that sentiment today, where because I know, the great parts and the faults of AI, I'm increasingly more and more, supportive of the human intuition piece connected to AI. And I think that there's definitely a tension that exists between, using the power of AI to synthesize large amounts of data and come up with, decisive claims, while also the human intuition side of it that is layering on, business context and, and kind of the softer parts of what good analysts have been able to do over time. But anyways, now we're getting far away from our point. But just to summarize, credibility, source, authority, I think are all elements of data that are going to have increasing relevance, and CFOs are going to be asking for the source to validate assumptions or outcomes that are being determined.
Yeah, I actually wanted to double click on what you just said from a summary, because what I heard what I heard Russell say is that he's looking for, number one, how does this tie to very clear business objectives that we're trying to do? Number two, how do we know that this is a good deal relative, benchmarking, that sort of a thing. Number three, how have we optimized for contract term length, which, I think it's easy to rotate one way or another. Number four, how do we gauge this tool versus something else in our tech stack already? And then number five is, what's the source of the data for all of those certain things? Did I summarize that okay, Russell, or did I oversimplify that?
You made me sound so smart and knowledgeable. Well done.
That's because his AI assistant's running alongside of this and just summarize that conversation.
Yeah, real time. That's right. No, I wish I had that going. Justin was telling me about an awesome tool he was using last night, and I thought that was great. So I look, I think that's very powerful information because I do feel like in this world that we operate in, the way things used to be from a procurement angle of focusing on biggest dollar things like is not sustainable. And also from a finance angle, once again, I think speed matters sometimes. Obviously, protecting against risk matters, but knowing when to optimize for each of those things in this scenario, once again, can be, I think, a pretty good competitive data. Justin, I want to click on one more thing. We had an awesome conversation yesterday with some procurement leaders. And one thing that they were concerned about is the evolution, the recency of the data, how we can stay on top of that, because even benchmarking from potentially a year ago might become stale really quickly. There was this big talk about, this massive migration from, especially when it comes to SaaS, historical, very much seat based to now, usage based, I know, consumption based type of a thing. How do you address those concerns?
Well, yeah, I think the first piece is awareness. Knowing that there's a change coming is as helpful as having a bunch of benchmark data around that change when that change does come. So, for example, we can often detect when there's a pending pricing and packaging change or a new commercial model that's being rolled out by different suppliers. And we have the technology, the capabilities to identify those changes in real time and then broadcast them out to our network of customers. And that allows them to be thinking proactively about these changes and not flat-footed at renewal when, supplier X comes up with a 37.5% price increase due to deprecation of one SKU and moving everyone over to another SKU. Being aware and having those things on your radar can make all the difference in the world for how you approach a sourcing event. So that's the one piece in terms of proactive awareness. And then in terms of the actual data and benchmarking itself, that's where the engine and the machine becomes so critical. One thing that I'm really proud about of what we've built at Tropic is the machine to be able to capture these signals in real time and start to expand coverage on new pricing models, new packages, in really rapid succession based on the way that we've instrumented our data collection efforts, our extraction, and I learned a new phrase last night, human on the loop instead of human in the loop, which means a human that's reviewing the loop and is on top of it to be able to interject in the moment versus a human in the loop, which is a stage gate that can slow down the whole system. So those, thanks to my friends at Meta, that's a new phrase that we're going to be taking on. But yeah, I think building that human on the loop mechanism allows us to rapidly grow and collect those data points so that as those changes materialize, we're able to be first on the scene with what is possible, what's not possible, in these new circumstances. But it's hard. Like there's a lot of change happening at every supplier, in the market right now as they rapidly try to evolve into AI first with new models that are tied to outcomes or consumption or credits. And usually when there's something new, that inevitably means they know that they haven't figured everything out, and there's a lot of flexibility that can exist. So what we always coach and advise our procurement customers is that, like, even in a less data rich environment, you can be fairly confident that when something new is coming out, there's a lot of flexibility in place as they look to understand and optimize pricing, packaging, growth within those new models.
Yeah, I think that's a very astute takeaway there that, the flexibility exists in the beginning and probably becomes more rigid over time. I don't know if that's universally true, but certainly something, a trend we're seeing.
Yeah, especially in these competitive dynamics where people are fighting tooth and nail to maintain market share, to land grab from their competitors. We know that commercial models and pricing is a tactic that can be used to get a deal over the line and expand adoption on a new initiative. So Yeah. So there's ways to deploy those tactics to drive the outcomes.
Okay, let's go around the horn as we kind of wrap this up. One actionable takeaway that you feel like should be prioritized. Come Friday as you're planning for next week, you want to institute some changes. What's one thing you're rolling out Monday? Russell, we'll start with you.
I mean, I'll start maybe with a small little story, if you'll permit. I had an opportunity to meet and hear speak Dabo Sweeney last night. Do you know who he is?
No.
I've definitely heard the name.
The head coach of Clemson for, I don't know, like over 20 years. A very successful head coach of Clemson, the still current head coach of Clemson. And I got to hear his story, of how he came to be in the role that he's in, but also a lot of interesting facts around just the role of the coach. And there was a Kahoot voting thing where we were supposed to vote what leads to success for football programs these days. Is it their nil budget, name, image, license budget? Is it having a strong defense? Of course, a lot of the Georgia Bulldog fans were like, yeah, of course, that's it. Is it recruiting the best quarterback talent from the high schools? Or is it the importance of a coach? And there was a lot of great discussion. Of course, there was a lot of opinions about you could make an argument that it's any of those things, right? And of course, the conversation last night was about the importance of a really strong coach. And what do coaches have? Years of experience in the trenches, work where they've done it, they understand it, and they've built up that trust with the players that when they grab the player by the face mask and they tell them, listen to me, you're doing this, do this differently. They hear it differently than if just they Googled it or heard someone on ESPN say it or a friend told them, because they trust the coach, because the coach is in their position for a reason. And so we've got all this data flying at us faster than ever. We don't know who to trust. What's the source of truth? We've got to stay close to those that are experts at the swim lanes that they've grown up and grown accustomed to. So if we're talking about buying things, we need to trust our procurement people that are skilled at doing this. And we need to trust our negotiators that are hand to hand and current with what is happening, what's the latest and greatest trend with all of the suppliers. Short circuiting that, because now you suddenly have AI tools and you can go ask ChatGPT or Claude some string of questions and get back a response that makes you feel confident. That would be like Dabo Sweeney's players ignoring what he says just because now they have AI. That would be ridiculous. We agree that would be ridiculous. It is no less ridiculous in the world of buying things.
Yeah, I like that you used the word trust, because one thing I'm taking away, and I'm already kind of thinking about, do I modify the workflow or build some sort of quick agent or something to help ensure that when a request I've been working on, a request the stakeholder submits, comes to you, either to you, Justin, as a budgetary approval, or to you, Russell, as the CFO, that it captures that checklist that we talk about, but also, make sure that it challenges the sources of it to ensure that I'm not violating that trust. Because the moment that trust goes away, the moment that it's like, well, you leveraged AI or ChatGPT and the credibility of the source is questioned, that obviously kills that trust. And then it's like, okay, everything looks good, but is it really good? So, taking away that source has to be there as well as like, hey, here are the 4 things that, the CFO or the budget owner is looking for. Russell, over to you, or Justin, over to you.
Yeah, if I'm a CFO and I'm reviewing business cases or deliverables, I think we are now at the place where we can expect that AI is pervasive in basically anyone's analysis. Too accessible, too easy, and too good at what it does to not assume that people are using AI to arrive at their assumptions. And if I'm a CFO, I'm now asking people in these different business cases, obviously the source, like you guys both mentioned, but I'm asking, what's your intuition versus what's the AI saying? And I want to see and understand where you, as my trusted, recommender, colleague in this organization, are using your brain power to interpret what an AI's synthesis would be and layering in your unique and softer, nuanced synthesis on top. So I think that's going to be increasingly included and expected as, AI slop reaches, its apex. The value of human intuition incorporated within a recommendation is going to grow in importance, and it's going to be isolated separately from the AI synthesis in those analyses.
Nice. All right, let's put a quick bow on this. If you are in procurement like me, leveraging a strong data set is going to be a competitive advantage in the fact that it'll help me know where to focus and where I don't need to spend a lot of focus, regardless of dollar amount, because I'm factoring in things like benchmark, supplier CSAT, stakeholder CSAT, I meant, sourcing data, et cetera. And if I'm in finance or budgetary or CFO, I also need to make sure I'm harnessing, leveraging that data so I know when to push back and when I can accelerate an approval, quickly approve something and get it into the hands of stakeholders who clearly need the product.